Here are all the topics covered in the US political parties revision video. This video will focus on comparing the two-party system in both the UK and the US. There are many crossovers with the elections and the election system with the UK and US political parties. Some elements of this part of the revision video will be covered in the elections revision video. When it comes to how the two-party system operates in the UK and the USA, the pattern of similarities and differences can be seen. Let's start by looking at the similarities. Both parties cover a range of views and could be described as internal coalitions. These differences are frequently ideological, such as the Hard Left and Momentum Labour Party and One Nation Tories, or the Tea Party Republicans and Progressive Democrats. Each of the main parties in the US and UK can now accurately be labelled as conservative or liberal/broadly progressive. They are ideologically distinct. For example, both Conservatives and Republicans generally favour taxes and tighter immigration policies and dislike big government. By contrast, Labour and the Democrats both put greater stress on the rights of minorities as identified by race, sexuality, for example. They also support environmental policies and are more willing to accept a degree of wealth distribution from rich to poor via taxation. Both parties are strongly in favour of retaining the current electoral system because it greatly aids their dominance in Parliament or Congress. The main parties in each country benefit from an electoral system that over-rewards them at the expense of third parties and independents. Other similarities include the fact that both parties exhibit internal party rebellions and revolts. It is a reflection on the broad spectrum of ideas and policy position contained in all four parties, and also manifests in contests for the leadership and securing the presidential nomination. In the 2019 Democrat primaries, Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren represented the progressive wing of the party, while Joe Biden and Pete Buttigieg were more centric. In 2020 Labour leadership contest, Rebecca Long Bailey was considered heir to Corbyn, while Sir Keir Starmer was seen as more centrist. Now let's focus on the differences. The issues that create divides and tensions within the parties on either side of the Atlantic considerably. In the Conservative Party, the main split up, at least up to 2019, was the Leave or Remain, while in the USA, the main Republican divides are arguably foreign policy and trade, and how far to expand or reduce the reach of the federal government, and therefore the budget deficit. The Conservative Party is more socially progressive than the Republicans on issues such as abortion and same-sex marriage. Also, Conservatives formally support the NHS, while no Republican would favour a socialised healthcare system. By contrast, the Democratic Party is more moderate and centrist than the Labour Party was under Corbyn, although the election of Sir Keir Starmer in 2020 propelled it more towards the centre ground. Today, Republicans sit to the right of the Conservatives, especially on social issues, and Democrats remain more to the right of Labour. The UK parties have long been more ideologically based and distinct, while this is a much more recent phenomenon in the USA. Other differences include party unity. Party unity in the legislature generally remains lower in the US compared to the UK, although the period of 2015 to 2019 saw considerable internal divides in both UK parliamentary parties. In 2016, Corbyn lost a vote of confidence in the Parliamentary Labour Party by 176 votes to 40, while Theresa May in 2018 to 2019 faced a large-scale backbench revolts over her Brexit deals. By contrast, the US parties in Congress are becoming increasingly unified, with no House Republicans and only 2 House Democrats breaking party ranks in the Trump impeachment vote. The dominance of central or national parties is much weaker in the US, in part due to the size and diversity of the country. Primaries also contribute to a weakened central control over local state parties. In some elections, primarily European and for the devolved assemblies, Labour and Conservatives compete under alternative electoral systems. The result is that neither dominates these elections to the same extent. The Scottish Parliament is dominated by 3, not 2 parties. There is no parallel to this in the USA. Cultural, rational and structural theories can be applied to the operation of two-party system. Culturally, both countries have historically been accustomed to two-party dominance. While this is more pronounced in the US, with the two-party duopoly only temporarily suspended in the late 1850s, it is a long-standing feature of British or at least Westminster politics. Aside from periods of party realignment such as the 1920s, when Labour eclipsed the Liberals as the main opposition to the Conservatives, and the 2010 to 2015 coalition government, Parliament too, as its seating arrangements convey, has mostly been a two-party affair. In part, this is due to the structure of the electoral system being mostly majority, or first past the post. The official designation in the UK of Her Majesty's official opposition, and in Congress of House Senate Minority Leader, also conveys this sense of single main opposition party. Rationally, two-party dominance translates into the main parties on each side of the Atlantic, seeking to appeal to a broad spectrum of voters. Large parties by their very nature cannot be narrow and niche. It also means that votes for a third party, especially in the US, are wasted votes, which in turn encourages voters to plump for one of the two dominant parties, often regarded as the lesser of two evils. Two-party dominance, therefore, becomes a self-fulfilling political fixture. While both parties, particularly at national level, dominate the executive and legislative, third parties are far healthier in the UK. The devolved regions in particular are normally run by one party working in an alliance or power-sharing agreement with another. Let's have a look at the cultural aspect of third parties. UK third parties have a far deeper historical roots than their US counterparts. The Liberal Democrats can trace their origins back to the beginning of the modern parliamentary government and were one of the two dominant parties until the early decades of the 20th century. The nationalist parties in Scotland and Wales can trace their ancestry back to the interwar period, while in Northern Ireland the unionist and nationalist divide has its historical roots in the 19th century. Sinn Féin won its first Westminster seat back in 1918. By contrast, the two largest third parties in the US are of much more recent origin. The Libertarians were founded in 1971, and the Green Party has its origins in the 1980s. US party politics has usually seen a succession of third parties rise and then quickly disappear. In the UK, the distinct culture, as reflected in the language, legal and education system of the devolved regions, provides a natural setting for the existence and appeal of nationalist parties, such as the SNP and Plaid Cymru. In the USA, there is even more cultural and ethnic and regional diversity, but arguably the country is so large and so diverse that either one would encounter a plethora of local regional parties, which would make national politics unworkable. In the USA, you have two national parties with distinct regional characteristics. In addition, independence, the priority of the UK's nationalist parties, is a complete non-starter in the USA. The outcome of the American Civil War put paid to any talk of secession from the Union.